Hello and welcome back. Today we will focus on revealed preference approaches in environmental evaluation. The idea is that after watching this video, you will know what revealed preference approaches are, when to use them, and how to use them. The revealed preference approaches are used in environmental evaluation to estimate the value of ecosystem services by observing people's actual choices. The key idea is that people reveal their preference for ecosystem service through their consumption, purchasing, and location decisions, for example, when traveling. These methods are best suited for value direct use benefits. The most common ones are recreation related activities and scenic beauty. Of course, to conduct an environmental evaluation using revealed preference approaches, you need to have access to data that shows market behavior such as housing, travel, or product purchases. So depending on the methodology, you might need to conduct some surveys which can make the revealed preference approach more expensive and time consuming when compared to market-based approaches and cost-based approaches, for example. Once you define the ecosystem service you want to value, you have to think about two things. First, data. Which are the data that exist on actual choices? Gather data on how people spend money or time in relation to environmental goods. For example, travel to parks and choice of residential location. Then you can think about the method. There are basically three methods. The first two, hedonic pricing and travel cost model, are the most used methods in environmental evaluation. About the hedonic pricing, this method is used to estimate the value of environmental attributes, such as scenic view and clean air, that might affect prices of market goods, like, for example, houses. It is a very used method and widely accepted. The idea of the hedonic pricing method is that you can decompose the price of a house into all the components that affect this price, like its size, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, and some environmental attributes as well, like if it's close to a park or if it's located in an area with low noise levels. The assumption is that people are willing to pay more for certain environmental qualities or attributes. When should we use it? The hedonic pricing method is used when you want to measure how specific characteristics, especially like environmental ones, affect the price of a house or property, and when you have sufficient data to perform robust statistical analysis. And this might be the main challenge, having reliable and sufficiently large sample to provide you robust estimates. When using this method, it's important to consider all relevant market participants. So to be clear, hedonic price is typically applied to the entire market for certain goods, such as houses, um, sold in an area, not just those that purchase a certain feature or experience a particular environmental amenity. So again, this is important to ensure your model captures the full variation in prices and characteristics. This method use a statistical model, usually like a regression, to isolate the effect of each characteristic by controlling for other factors, so the analysis is robust only if it includes all relevant market data. Here we have an example. Suppose an environmental economist is studying a region with several lakes. Some lakes are clean, while others are polluted due to agriculture runoff, which increase levels of dissolved inorganic nitrogen and total suspended solids in the water. The economist wants to estimate how much water pollution affects residential property values. So to conduct this evaluation, you should follow four steps. The first step is data collection. We should collect data on property sales for homes sold within the past year, property characteristics like size, age, number of rooms, number of bathrooms, distance to lake, and others. Then water quality data, measured concentrations of dissolved inorganic nitrogen and total suspended solids in each lake as recorded by local environmental agencies. The second step is the model specification. Usually we use a log linear or a log function, but you can test other functions to see which one has the best fit considering your data. In this example, I assume a simple linear hedonic price function. So here you can see the equation. P is the sale price of property I in this case. DIN is the dissolved inorganic nitrogen, the concentration at the nearest lake to property I. Then we have TSS, the total suspended solids concentration, again at the nearest lake to property I. X is a vector of other property and neighborhood characteristics, like the ones we mentioned before, size, age, number of rooms, and etc. And alpha and beta are the regression coefficients that we want to estimate. And then we have like the error term. The third step is the estimation. The economist runs a regression analysis using all the collected data. Suppose that after running this analysis, he or she get the results I'm showing you here. So for example, in terms of interpretation, we have that for each 1 milligram per liter increase in the dissolved inorganic nitrogen property prices decrease by $10,000, holding other factors constant. And similarly, for each 1 milligram per liter increase in suspended solids, prices decrease by $800. The final step, step 4, is evaluation and policy implications. The coefficients on dissolved inorganic nitrogen and total suspended solids represent the marginal implicit price of water pollution, the amount by which property values decrease with increased pollution. It is worth noting that hedonic pricing gives you the property market's revealed value of clean water, that is how much more homeowners are willing to pay for a home near cleaner water, or how much property values would increase if water quality improved. It does not provide the total value of clean water for all uses or for everyone in society. But despite that, this method is considered very robust and it has been widely used for estimating the value of water quality in housing markets. The next method is the travel cost method. This method is used in environmental economics to estimate the economic value of recreational sites or natural resources by analyzing the costs that people incur to visit them. The method is based on the idea that the value of a recreational site is reflected in the amount of money and time people are willing to spend to travel there. When to use the travel cost method or travel cost model for conducting evaluation on use values, more specifically recreational use value. So we use the travel cost method when we want to estimate the value or benefit people get from visiting natural or recreational sites, such as parks, lakes, beaches, or forests. This method is also very used to assess the impact of changes like increased entrance fees or reduced access on visitors' numbers and welfare. How to use the travel cost model. As with the hedonic pricing, you can follow 4 steps. The first step consists of data collection. In this first step, you will most likely need to conduct a survey because the data needed here do not exist in most places. So you should gather information on the number of visitors to the site, collect data on travel costs like fuel, accommodation, restaurants, souvenirs, entrance fees. You should collect data on all tourist expenses, and that is why you will most likely need a survey. You should also estimate the opportunity cost of travel time, which is calculated by multiplying the time spent traveling by the value of time, which could be a wage, hourly wage. And remember also to collect demographic data like income, age, education level, and etc. to control for heterogeneity. The second step is model specification. We also use here statistical models to relate the number of visitors to the travel cost and other relevant variables. There are two main types of travel cost models, single site and multiple sites. Because this is very specific, I might do another video focusing only on these models. For now, let's just focus on travel cost model, like in general. The third step is the estimation. This method is nice because we estimate the demand curve for the site, how the number of visitors change or changes as travel costs increase. The area under the curve, the demand curve, represents the total value visitors place on the site and is known as consumer surplus. And the final steps like the interpretation. The results show how much value people derive from the site beyond what they are actually paying to visit it. To visit it. To better illustrate this method, let's go over a hypothetical example. Suppose an environmental economist wants to estimate the recreational value of a popular hiking trail. The economist surveys individual visitors about their trips, travel costs, and personal characteristics. So step one is data collection. The economist collects the data from a sample, ideally a representative sample of visitors over a year. Um, so here show an example of the data collected and that we will use in this hypothetical exercise. So we have the number of visitors per year, the travel costs, consider like all expenses, income, and age. The second step is model specification. The economist specifies the demand function at the individual level, such as the one that I'm showing here, where V is the number of visitors per year, TC is the total travel cost for individual, including both monetary and time costs. Then we have income and age. And again, we want to estimate alpha and beta, and we have the error term. Suppose the estimated regression equation is the one in the screen. In terms of interpretation, we have that for every $1 increase in travel cost, the number of visitors decreased by 0.2, all else equal. Also, higher income slightly increase visitors, while older age slightly decrease visitors. Now, based on the results from the regression analysis, you can plot the predicted number of visitors against travel costs, holding income and age constant in this case. As shown here, the curve is downward sloping, showing that higher travel costs reduce visitation as expected. And to calculate the consumer surplus, we calculate the area under the demand curve above the current average travel cost, which represents the value visitors place on the site beyond what they pay. So for example, if the average travel cost is $30, then the choke price, the cost at which visitors drop to zero is 75. The consumer surplus for each visitor can be estimated as the area of a triangle. In terms of policy, the results can be used to estimate the value of the hiking trail to individual visitors and how changes in access for example, given by like new fees, entrance fees, or improved trails might affect visitation and welfare, measured here by the consumer surplus. The last method I will discuss today is the averting behavior method. This method is not widely used. It values ecosystem service by observing the actual expenditures or behavioral changes people make to avoid or reduce exposure to environmental hazards like pollution. It is important to know that there is some overlap between this method and the mitigative expenditure method, which is a cost-based approach. To make this distinction clear, the way I think is that the averting behavior method typically values the decisions and expenditures of individuals or households um, who take actions to avoid or reduce exposure to environmental hazards, while the mitigation or mitigative cost method is more often used to value the costs incurred by organizations, governments, or communities to mitigate or avert negative environmental impacts, usually at larger scale. Examples of this method are buying bottled water to avoid contaminated tap water, or installing air filters to reduce indoor air pollution, or spending time collecting cleaner water from springs, which is usually true for communities living in rural areas. Once you have the data, you can calculate the value by multiplying the average spending per averting household or individual by the number of households or again individuals who actually incur the cost. So when using this method, you should not multiply by the total population, like the total households, unless all are affected and all take action, which is unlikely. Okay, so regarding the main limitations, revealed preference approaches only capture use values. They cannot estimate non-use values such as the value of biodiversity for future generations. Market data required relies these methods rely on observable market behavior, which may not exist for all ecosystem services. We have like biased values. As we deal with surveys and statistical models here, the estimates might be biased for several reasons, such as rationality bias, omitted variable bias, and measurement error. So you have to be careful when running your regression. And the last main limitation I would say is related to the previous one, statistical models. Both the hedonic pricing and the travel cost method require using statistical models to conduct evaluation. So you need to have some statistical knowledge to conduct the evaluation in these cases. To conclude, revealed preference approaches provide a practical and evidence-based way to value ecosystem services by analyzing actual choices. They are especially useful for estimating use values when market data is available, but there are some technical limitations like the need to know statistics or econometrics to run these methods. With that, I conclude one more lecture on environmental evaluation. As always, I hope it has been helpful. I see you in the next video. Bye.